Hi, welcome to the Tournament Center. I'm Zac Hill, along with noted deck designer, Team Channel Fireball member, or Channel Fireball writer.
I write for them,
Caleb
yes.
Durward. Yes, exactly. Playing a black-white token deck. Now, we've seen some of the pillars of the format. We've seen Jund, we've seen Delver. This deck, a little bit different. Caleb, can you tell us why you decided to play a black-white token deck in a format as powerful as Modern?
Well, for one, it has some key tools to make it okay against the more degenerate decks. There's like a pile of discard in the deck. There's a lot of good options in black decks and white decks as far as discard and other disruption goes for the sideboard. And then I expected a lot of Jund. I expected a lot of people that didn't have teams to just use Jund as the default deck. It just won the 16-player person tournament with Watanabe won with it. And I figured a deck full of like Squadron Hawks, Lingering Souls, this sort of thing would have a real big advantage against that archetype.
Cool, and I'd actually like to talk about why that is. Let's take a look at the wall really quick. We see Squadron Hawk over here, 4 copies of that. Also 4 copies of Spectral Procession, and of course Lingering Souls, one of the best cards in the format. Now, you said these cards are really good against Jund. I look at the cards and I see you spend 3 mana, you make some 1/1s. You pay 2 mana, you get some 1/1s. Why is that good against a deck as powerful as Jund?
Jund has a lot of 1-for-1s. They've got like 1-for-1 discard spells. They've got 1-for-1 removal spells. The way they pull ahead is they Bloodbraid Elf and then they cascade into more 1-for-1s. So if you can like outvalue them, so to speak, say with Squadron Hawk filling up your hand, or with Spectral Procession or Lingering Souls just putting like a pile of dudes in play, they actually lose the race because they really want to play a Dark Confidant onto. So their Dark Confidant is dealing them damage, and we're dealing them damage in the air. And then we like pump them, or we use Martyr to like gain an edge in the race, and they can't come back from that.
Okay, so you basically you use these to get ahead and be resilient against their 1-for-1 removal cards.
Right. You can have like 4 tokens off of a Lingering Souls, for example, and then you put one of them in front of their Goyf, and you play an Honor, and you bash in for 6, and they're not winning the race.
That makes a lot of sense. So on the other hand, you know, you're spending 3 mana to make 2 1/1s. So let's talk about how you sort of stay alive until you get to that point, or stop some decks from beating you. If we can take a look at the next slide. Now, you've got 4 copies of Thoughtseize. I know you yourself are playing 3. Craig Wesco, your teammate, playing 4.
But we agree that Thoughtseize is one of the best cards in the format, if not the best card in the format.
Really?
Yes.
And why is it so good in this format?
Because it stops the opponent from doing whatever they want to do. I've heard people say that Modern's a format where both players could flip over the top 10 cards of their library and see who wins. Games are very quick. Sometimes people end the games with like multiple cards in their hand, things that don't happen in standard that often. And Thoughtseize is one way of like destroying whatever your opponent is trying to do, or the way that they're trying to destroy you, and give you time to like finish them with slower threats, like Lingering Souls or...
Right. So you see what's important, you just take their most important card. Tidehollow Sculler, another really powerful card, doesn't have a home in a lot of decks. Is this good basically for the same reasons Thoughtseize is?
There's that, and then there's also Honor of the Peer. A lot of the times, Tidehollow Sculler gets in a lot of damage against those same broken degenerate decks, because you go turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Sculler, take your thing, and then you play like an Honor or something on 3, and then you're actually like you're already getting in 3 damage, and that actually turns out to be pretty good.
Cool.
Then Honor also protects Sculler from Whip Flare, or Pyroclasm, those sorts of effects.
So let's talk about Honor. If we can take a look at the next slide. Now, this deck's full of like 1/1 and 2/2 creatures. Not the fastest clock in the world, but we see here 3 copies of Honor of the Pure, 2 copies of Charge across the Araba, not a card we see a lot of, and then a Hero of Bladehold, in addition to sort of winning the game by itself. Yeah, it also makes all your guys bigger. So how do we arrive at this combination of pump effects?
Well, at the very first start, we started with the old black and white token deck, the one that won a GPU a few events ago. And we found that Honor of the Pure was just much better in our deck than Intangible Virtues, so we ended up cutting the Intangible Virtues because we're running Squadron Hawks instead of Raise. Again, we want to be better against Jund.
And Tidehollow Sculler, like you said.
And Charge was a card that Wesco came up with. He was brewing a ton of different white weenie decks.
I was going to say, Craig Wesco, known for his love of white weenie, can find cards like this.
Perfect person to be working with on this white tokens deck, by the way. He comes up with Charge across the Araba, which I had completely forgotten about. Did not know this card existed. And we found we were actually like beating Tron decks by just like, they would sweep our board, and then we would make a few tokens, and they'd play a Wormcoil Engine, and then we would cast a Charge, and they would lose. Like, all of our creatures have +5/+5. Is that good enough? Okay, that seems good. Yeah, the card's just excellent. Steals wins out of nowhere. It's something that the Black-White Tokens deck did not have before we added this card. And it does a lot for the deck.
All right, and finally, why 1 copy of Hero? It seems like it's kind of just there. What is this card doing for the deck?
Hero's an excellent card to put in off of Windbrisk Heights,
Okay.
but it's not really a card that you want to draw multiples up strictly because it costs 4, and a lot of times the effect isn't necessarily needed. Sometimes you would prefer it to be cheaper. That's why we run 3 Honor of the Peers.
Right.
And then like attacking to make a pile of dudes isn't really something the deck needs that much of either, because it's got the quad Spectral Processions, the Squadron Hawks. It's got all of these gassy cards already. That said, it's still an incredibly powerful card, and I'm happy with one in the deck.
Sure, and sometimes you can win a game out of nowhere. So all right, let's take a look at some a bunch of cards that cost a single white mana. Now, again, one Hero of Bladehold kind of just out of nowhere. We also see a bunch of cards that we're not used to seeing in main decks. Path to Exile, of course, a defining card of the format, but also 3 copies of Martyr of Sands, 2 Burrenton Forge-Tender. A lot of the time in a deck like this, you see Ranger of Eos, a card that tutors up 1-drops. You don't have that in here. Explain this to me.
We started with the Ranger package. It's another card that's very good against Jund. However, it wasn't really pulling its weight in this deck. A lot of the times it has the same problem as Hero, that like once we get to that stage of the game, we don't really need that effect anymore. Like we don't need gas. All of our gas cards cost 3 or 2 mana, so like why would we spend 4 mana? And at that time, when you play a Ranger and you get double Martyr of Sands, like your hand's already gone. You've already played all of those cards. But just having some Martyr of Sands in the deck turned a lot of matchups from like very close, like we're racing them, to like not close at all. Or
why is that? You just
like,
block and gain 9 life or something?
More than 9.
Oh yeah.
Like usually, I've gained 21. I've also gained, I think 18 and 15 are the common ones. Like the deck plays Squadron Hawk. Like you're usually like blocking and sacking and gaining a pile of life.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. It makes it so that Delver can't really race you. Like you've just gained 21 life. Like how is a 3/2 flyer going to race you? Then that gives you time to like resolve your Lingering Souls, resolve your Honor of the Peer, and like gain it gives you the tempo you need to get to the inevitability.
All right, and then Forge-Tender, really good against Lightning Bolts, Pyroclasms, Jund
Protects your Tidehollow Sculler from all of those effects. Protects all of your tokens from sweepers like Whip Flare, Jund Charm, as you mentioned, and Pyroclasm.
Cool.
Pyroclasm, which is a main deck card in Tron. So
yeah, exactly, and we've seen Jund Charms out of Jund too. All right, well, let's take a look at now the mana base and the way this deck casts spells. But, you know, of course, one element of the mana base seems like a very important card in this deck full of 1/1 tokens, Windbrisk Heights. Is this sort of a staple of the deck, or is it just a way to get even more value?
Windbrisk Heights is pretty much just a way to get more value. In some decks, it's like the staple, the defining card. In here, it's like a land drop that's also a spell. It's excellent. I wouldn't play the deck without it, but it's hands without it can still function fine.
Okay. But like, if you hit a charge across the Araba or something off of it, can
that's,
really hit
that
them
is
out
the
of
nut high to put a charge underneath a Windbrisk Heights. People don't see it coming, and then they're just dead. And you can get charge off even when you don't have 5 mana available, which is something that Windbrisk Heights gives you.
All right, now it's of course the rest of the lands. We're taking a look at Godless Shrine. You're going to want that in a black-white deck. Marsh Flats, again, of course you want that in a black-white deck. 4 Arid Mesa. Is this basically so you can just get a turn 1 Thoughtseize and still have 3 white mana for Spectral Procession?
Godless Shrine is a plane, so it bounces to charge, which is very important. In Modern, you can just play like all these colors and still play charge and bounce all of your lands. And then Arid Mesa helps you find Godless Shrine, which you need it, which is basically every game.
Awesome. All right, and then you've got, of course, 8 plains, a single swamp. You don't want to draw more than that for Spectral Procession. All right, let's take...
The swamp is mostly so that when you get pathed or your opponent paths you...
You can get black mana.
Right.
All right, let's take a look at the sideboard. We've got Aven Mindcensor, Ethersworn Canonist, some creatures that are also disruptive. Really quick, what's Mindcensor good against?
Mindcensor is good against Gifts Ungiven, but that's more of a fringe use. It's mostly good against Pod and Scape Shift. We were expecting some number of Scape Shift. We didn't know how much. Expecting some Pod. We didn't know how much. We figured we would hedge our bets with this very versatile sideboard hoser.
Awesome. Now we've got Ethersworn Canonist against Storm. We've also got some more anti-Storm cards. We're taking a look at Stony Silence over here. A lot of white enchantments. Stony Silence, Rest in Peace, Rule of Law. What are each of these good against?
Stony Silence is excellent against Affinity. It's also a card that we bring in against Tron, though usually they're bringing in disenchant effects against us anyway, to hit Honor of the Peer and that sort of thing. So it's not like backbreaking against them, but sometimes you can steal games. Rest in Peace is good against the Eggs deck. It's good against the Cascade deck, that Living End, where you get all the creatures back. They can't really beat this card. And then there's a lot of decks with Deathrite Shaman, Tarmogoyf, and like Geralf's Messenger, where you just like play a Rest in Peace, and even though it shuts off your Lingering Souls, well, the flashback, it shuts off a bulk of their deck.
It shows up, it's worse for them than it is for you.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, and then Rule of Law, just like Canonist, really good against Storm. Actually works against the Eggs deck,
Right.
which that doesn't.
Which Canonist does not, yeah.
Right, so finally we see 2 Sundering Growth, a new card out of Return to Ravnica.
Strictly better than Disenchanting this deck. Get to populate some tokens.
Awesome, and then your Duress, this is like a 5th Thoughtseize in essence?
Pretty much, yes. That's exactly what it is.
And then finally, Memoricide and Cranial Extraction, kind of the same card. What do you want this against?
We were worried a bit about Scape Shift, which I mentioned earlier. And then it's also good against the other combo decks. Like if you're playing against the Kiki Jiki pod deck, you can name Kiki Jiki, and then they have to win the fairway, which they can never do. So it's a pretty good sideboard card, a lot of utility. It's a little clunky, but that's why there's only 2 of them.
And one of each just to diversify?
Right.
Does it really matter?
You don't really want to be like have 2 and then one ends up in your graveyard and they extract it for whatever reason. There's no reason not to run 2, so we run both.
Yeah, just get that little extra bit of value. All right, thanks so much, Caleb. That's Caleb Durward. Again, I'm Zac Hill here at the Tournament Center. Let's kick it right back to Marshall for some more Magic.